Here are the 4 things that you need to be doing if you're going to build that business, brand, community, or family in the way that God is calling you to build it. Let's go. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. My name is theTILAGO. If you are new around here, I talk about all things faith, the faith journey, and living in and on purpose. And so if you need more of that in your life, you already know what you need to do. Click that subscribe button right now so you can join in the family and stay updated on everything that I post. Today, I'm really excited because we are starting a new series. This series is going to be called How to Build God's Way. And so we're going to be walking through the book of Nehemiah from the Bible and just pulling out some principles and some practical things that we can be doing in order to build that brand, that business, that family, that community in the way that God is calling you to build it. Now, I have been stuck in the book of Nehemiah for a few months now. I've read it before in the past years, but this year I just felt like God was bringing me back to read it. Now I know why, because he's calling me to build this community right now. And so I've been really just trying to dig into it, trying to digest it. And so I'm really excited to share the things that I feel like God has been revealing to me through this scripture. So we're going to be taking a slow walk through this book because there's so much that we can pull out of it, y'all, in order to help us to build. But in today's video, we're going to sit in chapter 1, and I'm going to give us the 4 principles that we need to see in order to start building the thing that God has called us to build. Okay. Now, before I even dig into the scripture, I always want to make sure I give context, and I always want to make sure that we point to God first. Like, we find God in the verses and in the scriptures first. So first things first, context, right? During this time, the people of Israel had been exiled. They had first come into the land of Canaan, didn't obey God, got exiled again. You know, Nebuchadnezzar and Persia and Babylon came and took them from their land. And so now they are finally back in their land. They are back in Jerusalem. And in the book of Ezra, we read where the people have come back and they've rebuilt the temple. But what we find in the book of Nehemiah is they've come back, rebuilt the temple, but they haven't rebuilt the walls around the city. And so we find Nehemiah, right? And so he is, at this moment, he's a cupbearer to the king of Persia, Artaxerxes. And what that means is he is literally the one who is making sure that basically the wine that the king is drinking is not poisoned. He's the one who brings him the wine. So he's like tasting it first. And so he's highly trusted by the king. And we're going to see where that comes into play as we read the rest of these verses. So, okay, where do we see God in these verses? I'm always somebody who tries to find God first before I start putting myself in scripture, because I just really do feel like, hey, this is a whole book that God has given us to learn more about him. So the first thing I'm going to do is learn about him and see what he's trying to teach me and show me about himself, right? So in these, like literally just the first chapter, the 2 things that I believe God keeps revealing to me as I reread them is, number 1, he is faithful to fulfill his promises. And number 2, he really does want his people to be a part of his plan, right? So firstly, we see he fulfills his promise of bringing the people all back out of exile. That is done. That is something that he has accomplished and that we see in these verses. And then secondly, he chooses Nehemiah. He calls on Nehemiah to be a part of continuing to, carry out this promise, to continue to be a part of this plan. But he wants to get his plan done in the earth through his people, right? And so he'll call on us to do the certain things and build the certain things that he's calling us to, because he's such a good and gracious and loving father. He's like, I don't want to be a dictator. I don't want to make it happen all just like by myself. Like, I want the ones that I've created to want to be a part of this plan that I've created for them and for their lives, so that they can impact the lives around them and bring glory to me. So those are the 2 things that I see about God. So now, y'all, I want to give us the 4 principles that we need to see in order to start building the thing that God has called us to build in the way that he's called us to build it. Let's go. I'm going to grab my notes and my Bible here. So if you see me looking down, you already know what's going on. Okay, so straight off the top, the first principle that I see here and practical thing that we need to do in order to start building the way God has called us to build is to pay attention to what burdens you. Pay attention to what burdens you. Our burdens really do point to purpose, y'all. The things that are heaviest on us, the things that weigh us, come into our heart and are like, just sit there, right? The things that bring us to tears, the things that make us excited, the things that burden us are probably also the things that God has called us to be a solution for, right? And so how we see that like unfold in these verses is Nehemiah basically comes across his friends and he's like, hey y'all, like I haven't been in Jerusalem. Can y'all tell me how things are going there? I know the people are back from exile. And his friends are like, yeah, you know, the people are back. They've survived, but the walls around the city are either have been burned up or they've been torn down and they're not up right now. So basically it's like the people are kind of susceptible, my Lord, susceptible to danger, right? Like the city is not the city that we remember kind of thing. And so at that very moment, we read here in verse 4, chapter 1, verse 4, it says, when I heard these things, this is Nehemiah speaking, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. Just in that part alone, we already see that Nehemiah is burdened, right? Like, and what I mean, why I think this is so important is because his friends knew that the walls are down, right? Other people around in Jerusalem know that the walls are down. But did it actually bring them to weep? Did it actually bring them to the same kind of actions that we see Nehemiah have here? Did it bring them to feel this burden, right? So you've got to pay attention to the burdens that God places in your life, because sometimes when we have these burdens, we think like, God, why do I feel this and all the things? But you are really feeling that by God's grace, because everybody doesn't have the same burdens, right? Everybody is not affected by the same things in the same way. And so when you're affected by something and it makes you that like, it just, you know, grips your heart that much, then it's probably something, again, that you are a solution to. God has placed something in you and he's equipped you with something to be a solution to that problem or that burden that you're feeling. So we see right here that it really becomes a burden to Nehemiah, right? That when he heard these things, he sat down and wept. Okay, so that's the first principle. The second principle is to seek God first. Seek God before you take action. And I'm saying this because, y'all, sometimes we get these burdens, right? And we feel this passion and we're fueled up and then we want to go and make decisions really quickly. That is not the way that you want to do this to build the thing that God has called you to build. You want to make sure that you seek him first with that thing. And so we see still in verse 4, right after that, what we just read, we see here it says, for some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And then it goes on to list out we go on to be able to read his prayer to God. And he is reminding God of what he knows that God has promised them through Moses, right? And he's going to him heavy and saying like, listen, God, I know that your people were in exile and I know we were not, you know, we didn't obey you and that's why we were in exile. But now we've come back, right? And so he's like, I now have got to do something about this, but I need you to go before me, right? And so he's praying to God, he's seeking God first, and what are the action steps that I even need to take, rather than, hey, I'm burdened, let me just go take action. That's not how we want to do this thing, right? And so when you're building something, you feel this burden, you feel this weight in your city, in your community, in your area, in your lane, then the first thing you have to do is go and seek God first for instruction. Don't try to go and just make things happen in your own strength, because guess what? You will have to go and sustain that thing in your own strength as well. But if we go to God for wisdom and for guidance and for, him to show us what we are actually equipped with, then we will begin building the thing that he's called us to build in the way that he's called us to build it. So we have to make sure we are going to God first. Seek God first before you take any action. Now, the third principle or practical thing that we have got to do in order to start building the thing that God has called us to build in the way he wants us to build it is we've got to take action with confidence and courage. We have got to take action with confidence and courage. And the reason I'm saying this, y'all, is because y'all know whenever God calls you to build something, most of the time it is something that is so much bigger than you can even understand, imagine, fathom, wrap your mind around, right? And you're like, why are you calling me? And immediately fear and doubt start to creep in and confusion starts to creep in. And you start to, kind of like make excuses and push back at what God is telling you to do. But he knows the plan, right? And so he'll give you these actions where you're like, how am I supposed to do that? Or like, that doesn't make sense or anything like that. But the thing that we have got to settle in our hearts and in our minds is that we are going to take the action. We're going to do the thing God tells us to do with confidence and with courage. And we're doing it with confidence because we know that we have already, gone to God and asked him for instruction, and we are only following his instructions so we can be confident in the thing that he's called us to do. And then we're going with courage Because y'all, it's going to take some courage. It's going to take some bravery to do the things that God has called us to do, right? Because again, they just probably won't make sense, and they're going to feel like you are not the person for it. Like you're not equipped to do it, right? And so what we see in scripture, and I said we were staying in chapter 1, but we are going to chapter 2. So in chapter 2, even in chapter 1, at the end of his prayer, Nehemiah says, give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. So he's talking about, hey, give me favor in going to the king and asking him if I can go and lead the people in rebuilding these walls, right? And so literally, y'all, that I just feel like I can just sense like Nehemiah probably had a little bit of fear, but I do feel like he had some confidence, because what God does in this next part, y'all, is just shows his goodness, his kindness, and his faithfulness, and shows that he hears our prayers. And so what happens is Nehemiah is bringing the like normal everyday things. He is bringing the wine to the king, and the king notices that Nehemiah is like downcast. And it says that he had never been downcast in his presence before. So that's why the king noticed it. And because he comes so close to him, right? So it's like, y'all, I just think about like, God set this thing up. He's so intentional. Like for him to be the cupbearer for this long, for the king to get, acquainted with how Nehemiah moves, how he acts, to trust him as he does. And then in this very moment, he's like, okay, this is the moment where I'm going to need the king to see something different in you. And I'm going to allow the king to like notice it, right? Because it could have been a day where he just walked in and the king didn't notice, right? Or, he tried to come in and fake how he was actually feeling. But in this very moment, he comes in the authentic way that, God has called him to come in, and the king notices and then asks, hey, what's going on? Like, why are you like this today? And then that opens the door for Nehemiah to go confidently and courageously and ask him to go and help or go and lead the people in building the walls around Jerusalem. And that's literally what happens. But he had to be confident and he had to be courageous in order to like even muster up the words to say that to the king and to be in the king's presence with this feeling already on him and this burden on him. So whatever it is that God is calling you to build, y'all, again, I know it's going to feel like it's bigger than you. I know it's going to feel like it's stretching you outside of your comfort zone, outside of your knowledge zone, right? But you've got to be confident in knowing like, no, this is what God said. This is what he's telling me to do. And so I am going to go and do it. So that third thing, again, we've got to be confident and courageous in taking the actions that God is telling us to take. Okay, now the fourth principle or practical thing that we're going to do in order to start building the thing God is calling us to build is we are going to set a plan. Make your plan, y'all. Now, I believe that this is really important, even for those of you like me in this season who maybe don't have a full vision of what the thing God has called you to build is supposed to look like, but you know that you got some inkling of vision. You got some inkling of something, that you can put into words, that you can put into a vision in your mind, right? And I believe because we have already, gone and sought God out for instruction and for guidance and for wisdom, that he will also give you wisdom, of course, in creating the plan so that you can make this thing happen, right? Through him. And where we see this come to life in scripture is right here in verse 6 of chapter 2. It says, Nehemiah has already told the king about what's going on. And so it says, then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, how long will your journey take and when will you be back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. Now, in my mind, I set a time is like Nehemiah saying, okay, like kind of doing multiplication in his head. And he's like, okay, this is going to have to happen. This is going to have to happen. This is going to have to happen. So let me just say this is the day. And I'm not saying that he said it haphazardly, but I'm saying like he's kind of tried to think about all those things first. And then he set a time. He said, okay, this is when I'll be back, right? Now, he maybe doesn't have the full vision and full picture, which I think we are going to be able to see in the rest of this book. But I believe that even him setting a plan, even him, an open-handed plan, right? So a plan where he's like, God could change this or he could change that, but I'm going to go ahead and set a timeline for this thing and, get this thing going like in an opportune time, because right now is the time that I need to go and do this. And so I believe that whenever we're setting our plans, setting our timelines, that it really does need to be open-handed, right? Of course, we want God to be able to come in and shape, shift, and do the things that he needs to do, move things around, so that it can, again, be built in the way that he wants it to be built. That means we've got to hold everything loosely, right? You want to hold it because he's telling you to take care of it, but you want to hold it loosely. Now you have sought God. Now you have been confident and courageous in starting to take action. So go ahead and set your plan. Okay, that is all we're going to hit on today. And again, these were just the 4 principles we're pulling from the first 2 chapters of Nehemiah in order to start building the thing that God has called you to build in the way that he has called you to build it. Now, I'm going to say this at the end or beginning of every video during this series, and anytime I talk about scripture, is go read the scripture. Like, do not just take my word for what I'm saying and what, is in here and what I've been pulling out. God might reveal something else to you, but I do believe that if you are somebody who knows you're supposed to be building something in this time, there's something bubbling up in your heart, in your stomach, in your mind, that's like, no, God keeps putting this on my mind. I have got to take action and I've got to take it really soon. Then this is absolutely a book that you need to dig into. It's a book you need to read so that you can learn about, yes, leading, but again, learn about building in the way that God has called you to build. We got work to do, y'all. We got things to do. We got people to reach. We've got people to show God to. And I believe that the way that he is calling us to do that in this season is to stand up, to lead people, and to build the thing he's called us to build. So I really hope you got something out of the video today. I hope there was something that was encouraging, inspiring, empowering, and I hope it kicked you a little bit into gear. I'm so excited to hear the testimonies of things that you guys are building. So I want to know in the comments, what is the thing that God is calling you to build? I want you to say it out loud. I want you to type it out loud so that we can, first of all, be praying for you and supporting one another, right? But also so that you can get some confidence within you about what the thing is that God has called you to build, because he is not lying. He's not making a mistake in your life and what he's telling you to build. So I'm excited to see what you guys are going to say in the comments. But of course, you can also throw down there if there's anything else that stuck out to you in these verses or in today's video. But again, I really hope it's helping you to get into gear, okay? So make sure that you subscribe and you stay updated so that you don't miss any of the videos in this series. We're gonna keep walking through this book. There's so much that we can pull out, and I'm so excited to keep on digging with y'all. Make sure you share it with somebody if you know they are also supposed to be building, and like the video. Just go ahead and put a thumbs up. Like the video if there was anything that you got out of it. And that's it, y'all. So until next time, go ahead and start building, okay? You've got the starting points right here, right now. And I can't wait to see y'all in the next one. Bye.